Hi, we're Option Conservation, and this is the Shoot Room Sessions. Hi, Piers.
Hey, Rich.
Welcome to your Shoot Room session. I am bursting with excitement to do this one. So, to start off with, can you tell everyone who you are and what you do?
So I'm Piers Clark, and I'm the chairman of a business called the Isle Group, which my wife and I started 10, 15 years ago.
Okay. So, we're framing that. You've had the most fascinating career with lots of different chapters and journeys, and we'll dive into some of those. Can you give us your career contents page? So take us from school, uni, and the different chapters that would make up that career.
Okay. So
You like the analogy, right?
And a lot of it comes back to I'm the youngest of four, and I'm the youngest of four with three very high achieving siblings. So whereas my siblings were, they were terribly good academically or sporting or musically, and my skill set was to make people laugh and to just be a little bit out there. And I swear that I think being the youngest, that first chapter, those first 15 years, taught me the skills that have actually been most useful in the last 15 years.
Just on that, one thing I've learned with getting older, just hit 40, is you don't know the lesson you're learning at the time until you apply it. So I look back and I'll see something, I'll think, God, I learned that on this building site or working in that factory or the myriad of terrible jobs I had. For young people out there, you don't know what lessons you're learning when you're doing those things, but you'll use them in later life.
And a key one being, you work for tossers for a lot of the time, and you only realise that you work for them once you've moved on.
If anyone in this room who works in OC laughs right now, thank you. Sorry, go on. So chapter one
was, I guess, learning that I had a different set of skills, or I was more outgoing than my perhaps more studious siblings were. I then went to college. I was destined. I was doing maths, physics, and chemistry as my A-levels, and was actually predicted to get an E in them. And I realised that my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, she was going to go off to university, and she was going to go and do something much more interesting than me. I was chairman of Rank Week. I was the singer in the college band. I wasn't being studious. So I did a last-minute push on my A-levels and got just enough to scrape into university to do an environmental sciences degree. Ironically, Stella didn't get the grades that she was expected to get, probably because she was dicking it.
Will she enjoy you telling that story?
I have no idea.
Sorry, Stella.
So she took a year out before she went to uni. But what that meant was I found myself at university doing a course on environmental science.
Whereabouts did you go?
Southampton. So Southampton in the mid to late 1980s. And unlike all the other freshers who were there, who were interested in copping off and stuff, I was going, well, I know the woman I'm going to marry. I'm kind of settled, and I shouldn't really be here. And oh my God, I better get on with some work. And for the first time in my life, I actually probably applied myself and found myself actually being quite good at stuff. I genuinely spent 20 years living in the shadow of my older siblings who were brilliant. And I'd never quite felt I could even buy a ticket to compete at that level, if that sort of makes sense. God, I didn't intend it. When we sat down, you didn't tell me all these questions. I didn't expect I'd be doing this outpouring.
Exactly what I hoped for. Just pause for a second. I'm
quite enjoying this.
One of the things that, since when we first met, one of the things that I think you've been an absolute role model for me on is how you talk about Stella and your relationship. So I feel the exact same way about Helen, met a little bit later in life. And actually, one of the other guests we met earlier talked about people don't talk about their relationships enough and about how that influences what you do in life and business and everything else. And I just adore, having met Stella now as well, the relationship you still have. It's just beautiful. And I think it's a great role model.
It's nice of you to say so. And just to truly embarrass her, we've been together for 36 years. And I swear to you, I love her more now than I did when we first met. Yeah. And when we first met, I was a horny 17-year-old.
Yeah.
And it's funny to be 36 years on, and we've had children, and the children have left home, and we're going to be grandparents in January, and to find yourself
You're going to be such a cool granddad. Yeah.
I'm determined to get it right this time, to actually maybe be there
Yeah.
when the child's growing up rather than traveling around the world. Anyway, so I go to university. I find that I can do some work. I find I'm really keen on environmental sciences. I'm in the second year actually at university. I'm sitting in a public health engineering
Sounds riveting.
lecture. And I swear to you, because I used to write a diary, and when I went into that lecture, I had no idea what I was going to do. And when I came out, I knew that I was going to work in the water sector. I'd heard the fact 30,000 people a day die of diseases that can be cured through better public health engineering. And I decided that was what I was going to work on. Now, that sounds good, apart from the fact that here we are 30 or so years later, and the latest stats from the World Health Organization are that 30,000 people a day are dying from. So I have failed completely and utterly to have an impact on that very goal that is what drove me into the sector, which I do feel somewhat shamed about.
But you're not. So that is a horrific number, and one avoidable death is too many. However, if we just look at the data side of that, the population's
doubled. There is those you can, and the numbers obviously aren't precise. It's more, it's a figure that's used to keep pressure on us to strive to do better,
which is the right thing. Which is
absolutely.
Okay. That's amazing. You can pinpoint that exact moment.
Well, because it was such a pivotal moment.
Yeah.
I've been going to interviews. I was actually interviewed to get a job as a graduate at the Bank of England, and I remember them saying something like, "So, how do you feel about banking?" And I bizarrely went off on one about how I actually thought it was a bit immoral to take other people's money and just make money from money, and I remember thinking as I was saying these words, this probably isn't the thing they're looking for me to say.
Well, you kept going anyway.
But I kept. After I was on the train home, I was like, actually, don't think they're going to offer me the job. They didn't. Anyway, it meant that I completed my undergrad. I then did a PhD in civil engineering, public health engineering.
Did you want to do the PhD?
Oh, yeah.
You did?
Yeah. I'd actually I'd secured a job with Anglian Water, and I remember sitting. It was Easter of the final year, so I knew I was on for a first, and that getting a first meant that I could now do first in environmental sciences was good enough. That was what I needed if I was to do a PhD in engineering.
Yeah, straight from undergrad.
Yeah, I'm not going to do a PhD because my brothers did PhDs. And so I didn't, that would have been me following my high achieving siblings in their quest. And I thought, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. So I got this job with Anglian Water, and I was sitting watching a documentary, a sort of David Attenborough type thing. And they interviewed an expert, and it was Dr. So-and-so talking passionately about something. I remember thinking, that's who I want to be. I want to be one of the experts. I want to be one of the people that owns an area of, has an expertise that can actually do something rather than just being a good manager. I want to have that expertise, that specialism. And so that's when I then applied to do the PhD and ended up doing that.
Okay.
I was very lucky. I made my discovery quite early on in my PhD, so I was able to complete that in 2.5 years, and was working with Northwest Water then. So I then had a period working.
Was that Southampton as well?
No, Northwest Water is up in...
No, the PhD.
Yeah, PhD.
Right, okay.
And that was when my career started in the water sector. And I was a specialist in poo. So my particular specialism is in the anaerobic digestion of organic wastes. And there was a brief period in the mid-1990s when I was one of the world's top experts in that space. It's quite easy to get to be the expert in a specialist.
Not a highly in-demand field people want to do?
It's not.
I can't feel that, no.
No. And then I found myself moving into management, and I became the managing director of Atkins Water, which had 600 or so people in it. I was then headhunted into a role with Mouchel, another big engineering consultancy where it was about 3,000 or so people. There was then this wonderful moment where the finance director came into the board meeting and said, "We're in trouble. We're going to breach banking covenants in 4 months' time. We've got to sell something." And there was myself in charge of utilities. There was another managing director in charge of transport, and another one in charge of government services. And the only business that was really ready to sell was mine, because mine could be broken into energy and water and geotech and different pieces. So I said, all right, I'll get my business ready for sale. And so we finished that board meeting. And the next board meeting, I went back and said, you know what, I've thought about it. I don't want to be a seller. I want to be a buyer. I want to buy the water and energy business. And so now I was conflicted. So I was given permission to lead a management buyout, and I was taken offline and given 4 months to raise the money and come back with an offer. And that's a really interesting thing to go to because you know I'm part of Mouchel and understanding how the business is going and how it's all not going very well. But I'm trying to carve out my little bit, and we called it Project Isle. Mainly because it was a play on the word projectile. So every time, it's childish, isn't it? But every time the finance director will go, Clark, how's Projectile going? Projectile's going fantastic. He never once picked up on it. So Kevin Young, if you're here and watching that, it was always a joke at your expense. But Projectile was
a little bit.
And unfortunately, it didn't go through. There was a hostile bid made for the whole company by Vosper Thornycroft, and doing an internal MBO just wasn't going to be practical, so it died away. And I found myself, they actually asked me to go back. The chief exec asked me to go back into the business, and I went for a week back. And after a week, it was Christmas Eve on 2009, I met him and I said, look, I'm going to be an internal terrorist here. I've spent 4 months working out how I'd run my business if I wasn't part of a PLC, if I wasn't part of this big corporate, and you just don't want me here, it's going to be terrible. I just can't get there. And so we sort of shook hands on it and agreed that I'd leave. And it meant that my last day was a week later. It was December the 31st, 2009. So I woke up on January the 1st, 2010, thinking it's a new decade. I'm 40. I'm out of a job for the first time in my career. The height of my career is leading a failed management buyout from a dying PLC.
Had you told Stella you were going to tell him you were quitting?
No, I hadn't. But Stella's been spectacular. She's very, very supportive. I don't think I knew I was going to commit until you're sitting there in front of me.
I don't believe you.
You're in the conversation. I can't remember whether I did.
Your eyes say a different story. Anyway, go on. So 2010.
So then I found myself on my own, and Thames Water asked me to join them as their asset director. They were launching their capital program, which is $1 billion or so a year, and they needed someone to come in and just get the business ready for that. And
that must have felt like the perfect fit after trying to gear up to do a similar type of thing.
Yeah, it was only 800 people. So I don't mean that to sound pompous, but I was used to a much more complicated business. So I knew that what you got was lots of technically competent people. What we needed to do was point them in the right direction, hire a few new people, probably sack a few people who were coasting, restructure it. And as an interim, my job was initially just to be interim. Is to get the business ready to hand over to someone who then is going to take it forward. I wasn't looking at joining Thames long term, although it ended up being 5 years because they then asked me to be the commercial director and that. Then I joined a private equity, a big global private equity firm, which might come up later, so I'm going to avoid saying the name of it. That didn't last very long for reasons that might come up later in this conversation.
I'm sure they will, yeah.
And so I left them and joined Isle. And Isle is a technical consultancy that works with 300 water utilities around the world, helping them identify new business opportunities, new innovations.
Okay, so what year did Isle start?
So Isle started in 2010.
2010. Wow. Okay. So we can go either way with this. Let's start with the big team side of it. So when you were leading bigger teams, and I think the largest I ever led in the EA was sort of 450, how would you describe your leadership style with a team's that sort of size or a business?
So the bit that I only realised later on was the shadow of a leader, the what drives you, what matters to you, cascades down. So if you're a bully, your teams will bully their teams, and it will cascade down. If you're an optimist and have a vision, people will join and walk forward on that vision. And we sit inside Oxygen. My experience with an Oxygen is the shadow of the leader cast down there. And it doesn't actually matter whether you're running a team of 20 people or a team of 2,000 people. That leadership shadow is enormously powerful. And the principles that you live by. The big challenge is knowing what drives people to come to work. If I said to you, think about your senior team, could you name the 5 things that matter most to them? Because it probably isn't money. It'll be 3 or 4 other things that are driving them. It's their work-life balance. It's the freedom they get. It's the entrepreneurship. It's the vision.
Adventure, environment, impact.
Yeah.
It's the 3 principles that... So I always bristle with corporates that set their culture statements. They lock their senior team in a room, write some stuff on the board that means nothing to anyone else and tell people that's what it's about. No. Listen to the actual culture you have that's working there. I agree with your shadow point. The bit I struggled with from a big team perspective was I wanted to be the type of leader that comes from a sporting background, right? I want to be the first one that runs through the wall. I want to be able to have my arm around everyone and pick them up when they need it and have that sort of close relationship. I couldn't do that with 450 people. And being in the public sector, I had no ability to move on those people that were coasting. Everyone was coasting. So 2 or 3 people that weren't. So you ended up with no progression, no development, just stifled. And I couldn't have told you the 5 reasons that those people came to work because they didn't have them, because they had no other choices to go anywhere else. So that's what I didn't like about a big structure. I do think now that we're so fortunate to have so we're 20 at the moment. We were 2 of us 18 months ago, and we'll be 30 by the end of the year. But what's been wonderful about that is being able to be very conscious of that shadow, and also amplify those hopes and dreams of everyone within the team. So we talked about your big team. How was your leadership style? How would you describe it now in the Isle Group?
So part of the beauty of the Isle Group now is that I am chairman and I have a chief executive. So I have deliberately extracted myself, partly because I want to be free from Isle. I'm coming to the next chapter of my life and want to do some different.
When did you become chairman?
Well, actually, I was chairman since day one. Originally, it was chairman with a bunch of managing directors who reported to me.
Okay.
And then a couple of years ago, I brought in a chief executive. It's funny, I went to our shareholders and I said, look, I don't want to scare you and I don't want to... it's just an idea and feel free to say no to it, but I'm thinking maybe, perhaps at some point in the future, we should put in place a chairman. They're like, yeah, absolutely. When can you do it? I'm like, we could at least pretend I've been doing a fair job. So for the last 2.5 years, I've had someone else who's actually been responsible for... so my role has changed from lifting up and helping the managing directors of the individual divisions, because we have an Australian director and a European director and a North American director, and it's changed from mentoring and supporting them to mentoring and supporting the chief executive.
Were they an internal hire or external?
They were an internal hire,
okay.
But it wasn't the expected internal hire.
How did you know this person was the person?
So we said we were going to appoint a chief executive. We had 2 or 3 people put their names forward internally. We went through an interview process, and there was a candidate that we fully expected to get it. And then the current, the man who got the job was so impressive in the interview. The vision and passion with which he talked about my business was one that I found myself...
You get the goosebumps?
Yeah. I found myself, I want to work for this guy. He's so good. And that was a strange sensation to have as founder of a business. To then, I couldn't wait to pass the baton to him. And I naively thought, well, this is his first chief exec post, so I'll probably have to stay close to him and really support him. And he's absolutely flown, which is why as we now come to a stage where I will probably exit the business, I feel the legacy of having created that business and handing it on, I feel incredibly relaxed and confident about.
I adore that. So in previous chapters of careers, I've had people who say, oh, you want to make sure your people stay forever, and they want people to stay where they are in a box they put them in. I want everyone to fly. Are we all supposed to be trying to do ourselves out of a job and create amazing... We only recruit people better than us. And I don't even want to hope to keep people forever. I want them to fly and be the leaders and the activists and the change agents of the future. in America, and on that you owe me a trip to Boston, but by the by. He gloated when he went to Boston once. I was like, I want to come, and I never got to go. Anyway, and
I take him to a business meeting. It's never going to happen.
I invited you to one of ours at Leo, and you came to one of our events. In America, they more often talk about coaching trees. So you'll have a head coach who has junior coaches and analysts that then go off and be their own head coaches in years to come. And they celebrate that coaching tree. And we don't do that in business here enough. We don't celebrate that people have come from those various different spaces and go on to achieve great things. I'm acutely aware of time.
Yep.
So we're going to take a quick break and come back for part 2. Welcome back to part 2. Piers, we just finished an incredible run through your story and your career. When we first met, you just part-exited some of the Isle Group?
Yep, we sold 52%.
Okay. And year was?
We actually sold it in 2017.
Okay. So and we met 2021, maybe, something like that. And I always remember being struck by the fact that you didn't go out and buy a yacht or a Ferrari. You bought a Woodland. Why did you buy a Woodland?
Well, I'm a terrible driver. I've been banned twice, and I'm about to be banned for the 3rd time. So I'm back up at 12 points. Too fast. Are you kidding? Yeah, and it's because I don't pay enough attention on the road.
You're not a fast driver, right?
No. I
drive a Kia.
I know. I end up driving at 52 and a 40 or something like that, which is good reason to take me off the roads. I get that, but I'm about to be banned.
It's because you're bored, right? You're not paying attention.
Yeah. I find driving very boring.
Yeah, that's why I don't do a lot of driving.
I wouldn't, because there's no point in getting a fast car because I'm a terrible driver, and I love my wife and haven't got the libido or the energy to try and have an affair. That sort of stuff's never going to work. And so a Woodland felt like the passion that I wanted to do. And I've always wanted a Woodland. And I love the idea of planting trees that will be there in 500 years' time. Yeah, I don't want my name to be remembered. I don't want a park named after me or anything stupid like that. But I do like the idea that there might be a bit of environment that people will be able to enjoy that might have come from having had someone...
I'm going to name a patio after you. We've got Piers' patio. We need to do that. We need to name part of...
Patio?
Yeah, well, it's the alliteration, right? We're shooting for the P. Okay.
Well, pier. You could name a pier.
I don't have a pier. If we get a pier, we'll work on that. Okay, so we came to see your Woodland. You kindly showed us around through.
And there was a brief period where I have more land than you.
That's accurate. You did, yeah.
I had 12 acres. You had none.
None at all. Yeah. I mean, we're not comparing size for size here, Piers. You know, you had yours first.
How many is it now?
28,000.
28,000. I'm at 12, about to go to 36.
Are you doing the second project?
The second one.
Okay. Are you happy to?
Yes.
Yeah. So what's the project number 2?
Project number 2. So project number 1 was buying 12 acres at the bottom of an ancient woodland. So it was on the edge, and it's really interesting woodland at the edge.
I love it. Walking around it with you is magical.
It's just spectacular. And we created all these habitats. We built a pond and all sorts of things. Project number 2 is 400 meters away, and it's 24 acres, and it's basically a big empty field. It's got 300 sheep in it. It's overgrazed. And it's a ecological nightmare.
Sheep-wrecked. I know, yeah. It gets used a lot in Scotland.
But that's the blank sheet of paper that we're going to build upon. And within, I've got 30 years left. So by the time I shuffle off this mortal coil, there's going to be woodland pasture. There's going to be a huge new pond. We're going to have, we've already got I've got Sussex Wildlife Trust. I've sort of brought them along and said, what do you think about this? And this is what we're going to do. You could tell their excitement.
Yeah, because a willing landowner that's happy to work with them is so rare in the sector.
It's a bit sad, isn't it? But, so that's the next project. We've put the offer in. The offer's been accepted. The legals are working their way through. So
nice. I remember you calling me going, is this madness? I'm like, no. Buying a yacht would be madness. Buying woodland, no, it's a great... If you want to do it and it's passionate and important to you and the family.
And that advice was so good because it was... I got caught into... They're asking for 450,000 for 24 acres. Is that... And you get yourself caught into... But you know what? Without being pompous about it, 450,000...
You've earned it.
Yeah.
Well, and we went through the numbers, right? And I was able to do that. And then I said to you, does that matter if this is... so?
And it was... so insightful because actually what mattered was doing something I love with the money that we've got.
Totally agree. And it's lovely for me to be able to help a little bit because I've really enjoyed having you on the other end of the phone to ask some of these questions and stuff. So that segues beautifully into me setting myself up for a massive fall here. So when we first met you and told you about the concept of OC, what did you think?
So I thought, so the way you pitch in my phone, you're saved as Rich Stockdale, 20,000 acres across the UK, exclamation mark.
Okay.
Because that's what I came away from. When I met you and Dan, and we wandered around the woodland and we went to the pub, and you shared with me the fact that you've been given this challenge of tens of thousands, trying to buy and rewild tens of thousands of acres across the UK. And you had the threads of some idea, and you had a lot of passion between the two of you, a lot of expertise and knowledge. But no, this was uncharted territory. No one had done this before, and I wanted to. I thought the chemistry was really good between us, and I didn't think you were mad, but I thought the task was mad, and I wanted you to succeed, and I wanted to cheer you on from the sidelines, but I didn't think you'd do it. And when 12 months later, or however long it's been,
18 months.
18 months, you've shot through that target. It's incredible.
It's very kind, thank you. You and lots of other really helpful people along the way have guided us and given us support, and none of this would be possible without the Auction House Group and Mark Dixon and stuff. So if you listen to this, thank you, Mark and Lil, thank you very much.
Wind under your wings, and
we've taken off a little bit. So much more to do. So can't say a huge amount about it, but what's been great is we only ever intended to do this within those parameters that sort of you described, within the envelope of funding we were given, Fund One as we've called it, together to look after these assets in perpetuity, to show it was possible to deliver positive environmental and social impact and generate a profit as a result of that, not the purpose. And what that's done is people have really noticed that, and the momentum and the speed. A bit like you said about the leadership shadow, the aspiration and inspiration has cast that shadow as well, because there's so little of it in the environment sector. The fact we've gone, why not? Let's fly, has pulled people towards us, and ultimately we ended up having 13 different expressions of interest around giving us additional funding. So I've been asked, how have you raised money? I'm like, I haven't. We've finally kindly got initial funding, and since then everyone's just said, can we fund you? Do you want more? So we're in discussions with preferred partners at the moment, and by the time this goes to air, we might be talking about Fund 2, which will be twice as much again, which is really exciting. That's something I wanted to move on to talk to you about. So you mentioned your brief stint spent in the sort of investment world and that fund world. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I work for one of the world's largest and most successful private equity firms. They were launching a fund into water, and they wanted someone to lead that. And so I was appointed as managing director of this multi-billion dollar investment fund. And I went there because I had a vision of what I wanted the impact I thought we could make. And what became apparent was that
it's really sexy as well, right? Like the name brand, the cachet.
It was good.
It would have turned my head as well, I think.
And there was some really odd things, like I was paid, my basic salary was $250,000, and you got a guaranteed bonus. You just had to be alive 12 months later. That wasn't the only criteria, alive and employed by them, to get an equivalent sum.
Why was it structured that way?
I have no idea. Well, in the interview they said, so the salary is this, which was equivalent to what I was earning in Thames at the time. But we understand that you've got children and school fees are terribly expensive, and so you need to have some uplift. They genuinely said that. I thought, well, my kids go to the state school. It was a truly strange experience. Anyway,
yeah.
The reason I left them was because there is a playbook that is used by successful funds, by some successful funds, that is abhorrent. And you need to be very careful as you take money from people. How they behave when they're courting you is one way, and how they behave when they're actually in the deal is quite another. And there was one particular transaction we were doing. It was a deal I'd been working on. I'd been there for 9 months. This was my first deal that was going up to investment committee. It was 600 million of investment, 200 of equity, 400 of debt, with some really good IRRs, internal rates of return allocated to them. and we were doing a negotiation with the counterparties, and my boss basically took over the meeting and negotiated in a way that was far more aggressive than I had done it. I sat there, and bear in mind I was 45 at the time. I sat there thinking, I know I've got here a good deal. And he basically came in and he overwrote everything I was doing and was very aggressive to the other side of the table. And they were sort of shell-shocked, and you could tell they were shell-shocked. And at the end of the meeting, they got up and left. And then there was a whole bunch of high-fiving on our side of the table. That's how you do it. Now, that's how we get them. This is how we make our returns. And to my shame, I participated in the I was like, yeah, well done. I learned a lot there. And I went home and I was changing for bed. And Stella said, how's your day gone? And I told her. And I told this story. And as I was telling it, I thought, I'm on the wrong side. This is not how I want to do business. And so the next day, 9 o'clock next day, or whenever we got in the office, I walked into my boss's office and said, you know what? Don't want to judge yesterday, but that's not how I want to operate. So I'm done. And of course, the point being that I was judging exactly what they'd done. And I'd been in there for 9 months. And the first thing they said to me was, this means you won't get your bonus. That was the first thing. Wasn't, oh, what did you mean about what happened yesterday? Or
please God, don't go. What on earth can we do to you?
The first statement was, that means you won't get your bonus. And like, the very fact you think, well, that's why I'm here. So, and as it happened, Isle had been started beforehand and was bubbling away in the background as this sort of little bespoke business. And so I thought, you know what, I'm done with corporate for a year. I'm stepping out of that. I'm going to just spend some time on Isle for a year. And then a different path, a different chapter of my career took off. But the story I tell there is natural capital. We need to be, you need to be careful because some of their behaviours, they're very greedy people.
We've seen it. We've seen it. And actually the preferred partner that we're really exploring things with, the principal reason is the culture fit. From day one, we spoke at an event and it was a renewable energy natural capital conference in London. Everyone else was traditional investment funding on the panel except me. I was brought there to talk about natural capital. Question comes from the floor. And I end up telling off a room full of 400 people, they've taken too much from the planet for too long. Of course we should accept lower returns.
You're quite threatening.
We were sat down and shirted up and stuff like that. But I did tell off 400 people, which got a round of applause from the younger people in the room.
Brilliant.
And got a tut and a shaking their heads from the older people in the room. Came off stage and we'd been on there like 2 hours, got grabbed back. I said, can I please just go to the bathroom? And left Elle, our head of storytelling, and Josh, our videographer, who's filming this, thank you, Josh, talking to these people. Came back, and these partners were like, we have been searching the whole of natural capital. We need you. Can you come and speak to us? And we had so much interest at the time. This meeting stacked up, and we didn't quite get to them straight away. And then various members of the team met their team, and then over the last 6 months, we've been getting to know these people in the right kind of way, and them as human beings, before we even talked about terms and things like that. So it's the culture fit that got us to that stage. We met lots of other people, and there was enough signals that, like, these people aren't for us. So we went to one meeting, and this group brought us into their offices. Could you pop in for a lunch and a conversation? Yep, no problem. And they gave us an old school waiter-served silver service dinner in a meeting room.
And they would have thought that was impressive.
So, and Ellie Adams, our FD, is brilliant, who worked for PwC on lots of big mergers and acquisitions, sort of 2010 time or early 2000. She was like, it always used to be like this, but it was so archaic. And I was just confused. I was like, we just came in for a chat. Like, what on earth? Totally bizarre. And they said to me, oh, well, obviously we might need you to do some things, on the site still. So we might need you to shoot grouse still and things like that. I'm like,
yeah,
no. And they, what do you mean no? And I'm like, I don't want your money. No, thank you. We're not doing that. And they couldn't believe I'd turned the money down. And I was like, no, our integrity and commitment to what we're doing here is far more important than that. I'm going to take another short break if we can, just to make sure we've got time to come on to chapter 3. So we're going to pause there. And we are back. Okay, so Piers, we were just going through the sort of the venture capital private equity playbook and how there's a real some places.
Sets of behaviours you've got to look out for. They are sharks. They're successful because there's a Donald Trump way of doing things, isn't there? Which is to make sure everything's mine. You've got nothing. And that's, or there's a way of saying we're going to build something together that's bigger. And you want to find those investors that are prepared to work with you to build something.
I worked with one business owner. He would have rather made less on a deal and won than make more together. And he had to win. He'd get the extra 5% out of a deal if that meant he never worked with those people again. I remember saying, why not make a little less and do 10 deals that makes everyone happy? And that's what I love about what we're able to do here. We're genuinely driven by positive environmental and social impact first, knowing and recognising the profit will come as a result of that.
If you do the right things, it will flow in.
It absolutely does. It absolutely does. So that takes us on to natural capital. We are seeing an influx there. So we've spoke to 3 or 4 big banks over the last few weeks that have rang up to have conversations about this, and they're saying, when they first heard about it, they were like, I'm not sure. But now it's becoming such a hot topic, ironically, with the climate, of people rushing towards this and wanting to get involved. What do you think about natural capital as an asset class moving forward?
So I think you're going to be a pioneer of this. So I think in the same way that we talk about the Victorian Industrial Revolution being what underpinned the society we've got today, I think in 150 years' time, you will be a case study. You, Oxygen, will be a case study that people talk about as having proven the way to setting natural capital as an asset class, because it's clearly a vital asset class. And the fact that 70% of the UK population has got climate anxiety of some form, and bizarrely they were saying on Radio 4 today that it's the 70-year-olds and older who are more concerned than the younger generation, which goes against what I naturally would feel, but that's what it was reported today. So I think if you can show that buying plots of land and rewilding them and making that an asset class that delivers a steady, reliable return, that is a phenomenal achievement. And it opens up the reason they're excited, the reason they're falling after you is because everybody can spot that you are pioneering the way forward. You're not going to get it completely right, but you're the sort of bloke who, if you come up against a buffer, you're either going to go through it or around it, but you ain't going to stop and turn around and come back. You're just going to go through it. And that's what I've always loved about you and Dan and the whole Oxygen team. I promise you, 200 years' time, you're going to be a case study that they talk about.
That's hugely kind, thank you. I just get to take the credit for a huge amount of amazing work the team do in terms of that. And yes, I'll go through the wall first, but it's only because I know they're all coming and going to push us further on. You've taken me out my stride there a bit, Piers. That's very, very, very kind. Thank you. If we're sat here in 5 years' time, what will you be doing and what will we be doing?
So if you've done 28,000 in 18 months, I suspect your rate is only going to increase. So I suspect you might have spent $1 billion. The
world's first unicorn conservation-focused company.
Wouldn't that be incredible? And for those who don't know, a unicorn is a startup company that gets to $1 billion. $1 billion valuation. So if you spent $1 billion, you're probably worth 5 to 10 billion. I'd love you to have gone international. I'd love you to have done something on the marine side as well, because I think what you're doing on land could be done. And I know the world's got to change in terms of how we parcel up seabed, but that's being raped ecologically, and it needs this sort of thinking coming to it. So I'd love to see you get the scale of doing what you're doing now, but 100 times more in 5 years' time. I'd love to see you take it internationally.
I'll take you to Boston.
Maybe. Well, wouldn't it be good? Wouldn't it be good if people were emulating you, that there were actually 100 businesses like yours across the world?
That's why I want to be a conservation-focused unicorn, because under that umbrella of it, if you can drag up the environment sector to be that aspirational, the startup businesses that come there, in my head I envision, if we do this additional investment deal and move to a Fund 2 scenario, that announcement has 20 people sat in their homes or at university thinking, I could supply that business, I could be a startup. And it's that embryo, and it pop, 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 and it builds the momentum, and it keeps gathering, And that's the bit, sorry, I should have said about when you kindly said about the future we'd have about investment. What's really exciting about that for me is if we can mobilise, institutional funds, and someone who pays into their pension tomorrow can say, I want my pension to do good and to help give me a future on this planet. And if we can show that very pension fund is making money as a result of doing good, there's no one who doesn't want that. There's no one who, given the choice, if you could have the same return doing bad or good, you wouldn't choose good.
The beauty of this is this isn't a widget that's going to be put to market and then sold for 10 times the value in 3 years' time. This is a steady 6, 8, whatever % return it is, year on year for generations. And that is perfect for the multi-billions, the hundreds of billions that are locked up inside pension funds. This is the perfect asset class for that institutional patient money that is wrapped up in our pensions and is vital for ensuring that those of us, when we retire, have got...
My hope is the way we will be remembered as doing this innovatively is, yes, quickly and ambitiously, but how we've done it, the way of working with local communities, being kind and considerate, and even the way we're doing deals, doing a deal that the sellers are happy to do. And we've never, ever screwed someone down on price and won't, because it's such short-termistic thinking. You're going to pay for that. If you buy an estate off a family who've owned it for X years, the wrinkles, the questions, the things you're not going to find out for a year, you need to be able to pick up the phone and say, can we just ask about that? And if you screw someone down on a deal, they're not going to take that call at all. Or if they are, it's not going to be a nice call to take at that end. And then that extends to the type of products and services you want to provide from those estates. So we want a premium, high quality carbon credit or nature credit that is transparent and accountable and honest and true, that you can visit and touch and feel. So right now in this country, you could not buy a carbon credit that allowed you to visit your tree or the peatland you're restoring, while swimming the river that's there, stay in the accommodation that's on that site. If we can offer that, that makes something at the moment which is so uncertain for people real and true and touch and feelable.
I feel quivering with excitement at that vision. That is so good. You've got to make it happen, Rich.
We're going to do everything we can to. We didn't touch on you. So 5 years' time, what are you going to be doing?
I won't be in a full-time role. I want to. So the beauty of what we do in Isle is we work with entrepreneurs who in the water sector, and I've got 4 or 5 that are asking me to work with them in a sort of portfolio advisory capacity, and some of them are incredible. There's one. I'm going to mention the name called Siloxium. They're a spin out from Oxford University, and they've got a environmental way of recovering precious metals from mine tailings. Now, there's more precious metals in the waste that's come from the mining industry to date. So if we can do the energy transition that's required go from fossil fuels to batteries, we need these materials, and they've got a technology that enables us to extract them from the waste material that has come that we've already, and it's incredible.
That's the circular economy in a nutshell, right? That's
because we are going to need to mine.
Totally.
And I look at it and I think, we're negotiating now. There's a role on the board, and it will be a bad negotiation, but I'm sort of, you don't need to pay me. I'll do this for free. Because I'm...
You know the real answer there, don't get them to pay you. You need to take a part of that, right?
Well, and they're doing a process, and they may well choose someone else because I don't have any mining experience.
That's the reason to have you, right?
But I look at it and I think this is the sort of company I think I can help. I can help them raise their money. I can help them tell their story. I can help them. Yeah, that's what I'd like to be doing in 5 years' time. It's a portfolio of supporting entrepreneurs who are doing stuff, because I'm spent in terms of my ability to.
So keep me in the loop on that. Sounds an amazing company. I would love to see you take some of the successes of the Isle Group and have that small incubator fund where you do exactly that. You pick out that. Yeah, I want to do some of those together. I think we'd have a great fun looking at those and being like, there's another one. There's another one. We need that. Yeah, totally. Because right? You within whether it's 30 seconds or a minute, and you meet someone that you're like, that's the person. So I've been hugely fortunate to interview brilliant people across our team, but within 5 minutes of interviewing Ella, head of storytelling, so it was a Zoom interview at the time because of COVID and things like that, and the rest of the team were going, do not offer the job straight away. Within 5 minutes, I knew.
So I saw the shoot room that you did with her, and I saw you tell that story and her telling her side of that story, which it was a great session.
Awesome, thank you. Piers, what an amazing, enjoyable. That's the longest shooting we've shot, and I could talk to you for hours. The bit I'd love to close on is, over that past 18 months, having you on the end of the phone to be able to ask the ridiculous questions to learn from your experiences has meant a huge amount. So thank you for being there. I really appreciate it, and for doing this today. So thank you for your shoot room session. That's us done. Thank you very much. Goodbye.